This week, what we're going to try and do, we're going on a trip to Lithgow on Wednesday, today, Saturday. We thought we'd give the cruiser a once-over, a pre-trip check to make sure everything's right, because the last thing we want to do is get down to Lithgow and tackle some of these tracks and the car breakdowns. We've already done the clutch in a previous video, so you can go back and watch that, but this is more about what are we going to do, a pre-trip checklist, what's going to happen, because don't be the guy who thinks my rig's fine and you get halfway down your trip and you break down. So a little bit of time in the shed in the afternoon could save you hundreds of dollars and heartache on the tracks. All right, so let's start from the absolute ground up. Tires, they're the only thing that's in contact with the track. They're the only things that are going to keep you from crashing. So got to check your tires. Obviously you want to check for tread depth, make sure they're legal, make sure that they've got plenty of meat on them for the tracks. You want to be able to have all that traction and grip. Make sure the sidewalls haven't got any splits in them. Make sure the air is correct. Obviously tire pressures are super important. Torque wrench, make sure all your lugs are tightened to spec before you start. Very easily overlooked, but very easy to do too. So another important one to check is wheel bearings. What you want to do is get the wheel in, and so this one, I mean, these are fine, they don't need new wheel bearings, but if your wheel bearings were shot on their way out, when you did rock your wheel up, obviously up off the ground, you will feel it giving way back and forward. Another check to do while you're here is you can actually have somebody sitting in the driver's seat holding the steering wheel and turning the wheel, and this will check your tie rod ends too to see if there's any play in them. So or even just hold the wheel steady and get somebody rocking your steering wheel, and that'll say if there's a bit of play in it, your tie rod ends might be on their way out too. But these are all good. We just checked them earlier. The bearings here are all fine, so that's good. Let's talk about shocks. One of the easiest ways to test a shock is jump up and down on your ute, get a couple of mates, jump up and down. If when you stop it keeps going, like a bouncy ball, shocks aren't probably that good. Might be time to swap them out. These ones are squeaky. The other thing about the shocks is when you are bouncing up and down, making sure they don't bounce back. Have a look and see if there's any leaks near them, because if there is, it means some of the oil inside is leaking out, so that is ultimately going to make the shock fail. So if there is a leak, it needs to be tended to pretty quickly. This one looks good.
Fluids are the lifeblood of every 4x4, so it's something that you really need to keep on top of and make sure that all your fluids are topped up and clean and working correctly and serviced when needed to be serviced. So in this car, at the back here, we got clutch fluid, dot 4 clutch fluid, dot 3 or 4 brake fluid in this one. Obviously you've got on the other side of the car here, you've got your filler for your windscreen washers. Good to have a clean windscreen, and definitely coolant for your radiator, because if the radiator gets hot, there's no coolant, you ain't got an engine. And lastly, one thing we're going to do today is we're going to do an oil change for this car just before we go. So we will just dip it. It hasn't been changed in about 6,000 or 7,000 K, so it's due it anyway, but we'll just see where it's at, and it's up to spec, but quite dark looking. So time for a change, so we'll do that. When we're changing the oil, I'll just take the oil cap off. That'll let the oil drain out easy. And another tip, if you run your engine first and get it warm the oil up, it'll come out a little bit easier too.
So one of the most important things you want to check, in my opinion, are the brakes. So while it's on the hoist, we're going to rip all 4 wheels off. We're going to inspect the discs, the pads, and the rotors. I've actually bought some pads for this because I do feel they're on their way out. So we'll take the wheels off and we'll give them a good check, and we might even change the brake pads. It might be quite hard to see in camera, but just inspecting these pads, they actually look okay. I'm not going to change mine. But what I've noticed here is there is a decent lip on the rotor, and the rotor is a bit scored. Not for this trip, but I am going to have to get myself a new rotor. So I've taken the back wheel off, and it does look like these back ones are a bit skinny, so we might end up just changing them. So let's just take this caliper off and have a proper look at them. It's easier said than done. Might have to get a breaker bar. Oh!
Usually make stuff look easy, don't you?
Whew. They got it. Yeah, they are pretty bad at the back. So here are the brake pads. So it turns out there was no brake pad left on the back. I'll just go and get the new ones and we'll make a comparison. So that is what they should like, and that's what it was. Literally no brake pad left at all. That's not very professional. And again, that one has probably 3 mil on it. Look at the difference. That's crazy. That's absolute. I'm no wonder. Oh, okay. Should have done this a while ago. So there was a little bit on the end of this one. It just pries off. And we'll put it straight on the new one. And then that will just sit straight back in that recess. Oh, this is going to make such a difference to my brakes. Right, let's just get this caliper back on then. So what'll happen here, to push this back out again. So if you're watching for this bit, as I screw that, because obviously with all the meat being gone from the pad, this won't go over the new pads now until we push that all the way back. So you see the way that's completely recessed now? Fit back. Look at that. Done. Right, so that's that side done. I'm going to tighten this bolt up. I'm going to get across to the other side. I'll not show you because it's just exactly the same thing on the other side. So we'll come back when both brakes are done. So with the pads changed and the front ones we know we've checked them and they're okay, it's time to actually check the brake fluid. Now, when you're checking the brake fluid, obviously it's got to be up to the max level. You don't want it anywhere lower if it's not at the max level filled up. And if your brake fluid looks a bit dark, it's probably a bit old, it's probably not doing its best job, it's probably not going to be as effective as some fresh brake fluid. So if your brake fluid is getting a bit darker, time to change it out. And while you're doing that, have a look at the brake lines, make sure there's no leaks. And just make sure your whole braking system, because it's so important, because if you don't stop, you're going to crash. It's the fact, physics. The old Toyota handbrake. Now listen, renowned as not being very good. In fact, if you look back, I've done an episode on my old Hilux and how to tighten the Hilux handbrake. We have done one on the Cruiser as well, if you check that out. These things have got a bad rap. They're not notoriously brilliant, but when they're adjusted right, this one's adjusted right now. Let me take the handbrake off. I'm in neutral. Right, I'm going to roll a bit. Put the handbrake on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clicks. It's solid, and I'm not pulling that up hard. If it comes up more than that and you're having to refit, you still run it forward, it needs adjusting. Give it a good adjustment, it'll be way better. They're actually not too bad if you adjust them right. Your battery doesn't care how sick your rig is or how much power it has to. It's a battery. If your battery's more than 18 months old, you definitely have to go and get it checked, because if this thing lets you down when you're in the scrub, if you don't have a jump start pack and you're on your own, you are pretty much stuffed. Make sure your main cranking battery is healthy. There's normally a window in the top where you can look down, it'll give you a good idea, but any mechanic, any battery shop will do it for you. It's easy to do, it's simple, and this is, if you don't have a battery, you're not going anywhere. Now also, while we're talking about the battery, just do give everything a nice check. Just make sure all the terminals are tight, none of your wires are rubbing on anything, there's no corrosion there, everything's just, you need it visually inspected and have a good wiggle, and if nothing moves and there's nothing corroded, you're pretty sweet. I actually had a thing the other week, my winch isolator, one of the cords, it's actually here, you can see where I fixed it. It had moved in one of the trips and was actually just sitting very close to the fan, and the fan was slowly, had wore the car off the outside and was starting to wear the actual cable, and you could see a couple of bits of copper showing. I don't know, I was lucky I caught it and I've brought it back up, I've fixed it and I've zippy tied it miles away from it now, and I thought it wasn't near, but somehow in all the corrugations that we do, it's found its way over there. So a good check if that nothing's touching anything is, well, that's got me out of trouble. While we're talking about winches, do get your controller out, give it a good check, make sure your winch is working, spool it out and in, just make sure it's all working nicely. Spotties, you need these at night time. Just make sure everything works that should work before you go anywhere. Be proactive with all this, because if you know you're going to go somewhere and something doesn't work when you get there, it's your own fault. Let's talk about spares. In an ideal world, I put another 79 on the tray, off we go, we wouldn't care. Not that practical, and we're probably not doing the Paris-Dakar rally either. Look, it depends on what tracks you're doing. If you're going up the beach, it's going to be different to if you're going for a rocky, extreme hardcore session up the mountains. Jump onto the online forum, see what your vehicle is most susceptible to, whether it's CVs or tail shafts or whatever it is, and you want to probably bring that. Now, that brings me on to a good point. If you buy a new spare, what I try and do is I put the new bit into my car and then I keep the old bit as a spare, because I know it fits 100%. Because the last thing you want to do is be out whoop whoop and you have a spare that's brand new in your car and something breaks and you go to swap it and it doesn't fit because it's the wrong year model or it's the wrong chassis number, whatever it is, it just doesn't fit just right. So my tip is, when you're upgrading something, put it in your car, keep the spare, as a spare because you know it fits.
While it's up on the oils, I'm just taking the opportunity to check the transmission, the gearbox, the diffs, looking for oil leaks, looking for loose bolts, looking for anything that might fail on the trip. So we did just change the clutch yesterday in this car, so we do know that this whole bit's okay, but all the prop shafts, the seal, so there is bolts underneath diffs where we can drop the fluid out to change it. I am going to put in a diff breather kit very short. I've actually got one sitting at the back of the sheds here, so I might even do that today. I'm moving to the back, obviously prop shaft here, want to make sure it's okay. Exhaust check, just checking for leaks and anything that's loose, and just make sure that everything's as it should be.
So you've taken all these precautions, but invariably you're probably going to get stuck, something might break. If something does break, you definitely want a toolkit. Now, we are by no means sponsored by King Chrome. This is a 120 piece metric automotive toolkit. So this, I think, has got most tools that you might need. If you get stuck on the tracks, you should be able to MacGyver yourself something out of something here. Long nose pliers, side cutters, all sorts of hex heads, Phillips heads, flat heads. There's a knife, there's pliers, screwdrivers, Allen keys, sockets, spanners. If you can't fix it here, you're probably in bigger trouble than having more tools. So always have a little toolkit with you ready to go. All right, these two are pretty important. A flat tire does not care about your agenda. It doesn't care how much of a rush you're in or where that track is. A tire repair kit is going to be invaluable. There's no point in fixing your tire if you can't pump it up again. So a good air compressor kit. This has got the air lines. It's got my inflator, my deflator, and then in here is a dual ARB air compressor, and that's the nozzle for it there. So when we get stuck, if we get a flat tire, if we can fix it with the plug, we can pump it straight back up again and put back on the tracks. This is a really important one, recovery gear. If you get stuck somewhere, you want to know that you're on your own or you're with somebody else, you can recover yourself. Now, if you're on your own, a winch is going to be your best friend. When you have your winch, what are you going to put on it? Well, a good recovery kit will have tree trunk protectors, a snatch strap, soft shackles. I've really gone towards soft shackles away from the D shackles. I just think they're a bit safer. And other bits and pieces in here, gloves, everything you might need. Self-recover, or if you're with somebody else, obviously a snatch strap, you're going to be able to tie it onto the back of your car, front of theirs, snatch them out, or they're going to be able to help recover you. So a good recovery kit is a massively good insurance policy. And don't forget about the winch. I love having a winch, especially when I'm on my own, because that way, if you do get stuck, you've got a get out of jail free card right there. And the last thing on recovery, in the back of the tray here, I've got a set of Max Tracks. I always take Max Tracks with me because, again, if you're on solo or even if you're with somebody else, good to build a bridge, good to dig yourself out, give yourself more traction. Max Tracks will get you out of a lot of good sticky situations too. All right, so hopefully if you follow all those tips, your 4x4 will be happy, and so will you, because you'll get to your campsite or your track and you'll get back again and you'll be able to tell a story. Drop a comment below. Let me know what your worst breakdown or recovery was. I'd love to hear it in the comments. And apart from that, if you like this sort of content, please do subscribe, because we'd love to do some more of it for you. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.